I'd be sitting here and smiling for a while.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Guyana is now a full-fledged oil-producing nation. But how much do you know about this valuable yet finite resource? On our radio program, Guyana's Oil and You, we strike at the heart of every issue with informed views and credible data. The time is now for you to arm yourself with insightful knowledge on your oil wealth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kiana Wilberg, and this is a special edition of Guyana's Oil and You. I know that you're used to hearing us on Thursdays, but we have a special guest with us in studio this evening, and he is Guyanese business professor and accountant, Mr. Floyd Haynes. He's in Guyana for a very short time, so we seized the opportunity to have him in studio to answer some very critical questions for us. Mr. Haynes, thanks for taking the time to be in studio with us this evening, and welcome to the show once again.
Thank you, Kiana. Glad to be here, and good evening, Guyana.
All right. Without further ado, I'll jump straight into our first question for you this evening.
Sure.
And that has to do with the fact that you are pursuing the development of a merchant bank in Guyana. Can you tell us a bit about what motivated this project?
Well, several reasons, but the primary reason is that there is going to be a capital shortfall or a capital gap. If you listen to the president and his vision for the country and where he wants to take the country and how fast he wants to get there, there isn't enough capital, and by capital we mean monies to be invested. There isn't enough capital in Guyana that can finance that kind of development, and therefore the capital has to come from somewhere. Some of it will be multilateral type money, IDB, IMF, Caribbean Development Bank, those types of things. Some of it will be monies from friendly government, India, China, etc. But a large part of that has to be private capital. And I saw an opportunity to be a provider of such private capital, and hence the merchant bank. That is one of the things that merchant banks offer. Now, we are a non-deposit taking institution. You cannot come up and open a passbook account or a savings account and then withdraw and that kind of thing. We're here to facilitate capital for business growth and development. In addition to some of the projects that the president has in mind, the private sector is bursting at its seams, and the commercial banks aren't set up to make those types of loans. The capital essentially can be categorized in two forms. There is debt capital, which is a loan, what we call a loan, and there's equity capital, meaning you give up some ownership, you take a company public, you issue shares to the public, those types of things. Most banks, in fact all banks I dare say, are not set up to make equity capital. A merchant bank can provide debt, it can provide equity, it can provide a combination of two hybrid models. It can create various ways, preferred shares, common shares, convertible debt, those types of things, right? So there's a lot more flexibility. And I saw a huge void there that I thought, with my skill and background in the finance sector, that I can fill that void. And that's why I decided to go that route.
Okay. And how far along are you with this project, its implementation? How far are you with the process? I understand you have some regulatory hurdles to get through.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say regulatory hurdles to get through. There were certain things, certain boxes that we had to check. It's been a labor of love. It's been a 2-year process, perhaps. I started this a while back, and I was willing to wait. I wanted to check all the boxes and make sure everything is in line. The central bank, to its credit, wanted to make sure they're not issuing a license to a paper bank. You know, we've got a bank, we've got this, we've got that, give us a license. And so they insisted in certain things. They wanted to make sure you had the monies to operate the business. I had to show proof of funds. And they wanted to make sure that you have a real business. You have a building, it's been fitted for bank purposes, things like security systems, safe, vaults, infrastructure, internet, phone, video, audiovisual, equipment, etc., furniture. So we went ahead and we decided to get all these things in place. The last thing we are waiting for is the furniture, which arrived a couple days ago, I'm told, and it's on the wharf. And I thought they released it today. I'm not sure. There's someone else is handling the details. But at any rate, the security systems are in place. The internet, the conference facility, the safe, all that's in place. The building is outfitted. We're going to hang the sign. Probably, well, it's raining. They say when it's raining, you can't hang the sign. But at any rate, we're going to hang the sign up. And once the furniture gets there, it is my understanding that the Bank of Guyana will do a walkthrough, after which they will issue the license. So that's where we are. That should all happen this week. Soonest, by next week the latest. At least we'll be ready. And it's just a matter of getting the Bank of Guyana to do a walkthrough. And all indications are that they will do it quickly and will issue the license.
What will be the name of the bank, and where will it be located?
Oh, so the bank is located on Church Street, 304 Church Street. It's across from the cricket ground. It's called New Haven. The bank will be called, I say this because we can't call ourselves a bank, but it will be called the New Haven Merchant Bank. NEWNEWHAYVEN, New Haven Merchant Bank. We are located at Church Street, and if you give us a few days and walk down there, you'll see a big sign. You won't be able to miss it.
Okay. Now, you spoke earlier about the fact that banks are not set up to provide the types of loans that the private sector is in need of to fuel the type of development that the president has been speaking of since he entered office. Now, are you saying that the merchant bank would be able to provide the type of loans that might be needed for backing the development of a shore base, for example?
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't say loans. Loan is not the right terminology. Banks do provide loans. We provide loans, we provide equity capital, we provide... we can structure financing in so many different ways that traditional banks are not designed to do, and probably it's not within their charter to do. If a company, here's how it works in the States. A company comes up with a brilliant idea, they want to raise money, they bring in an investment bank like ours, and they say, help us go public, take the company public, sell shares to the public. So Guyana could own some shares, this gentleman could own some shares, all of Guyana could own shares, and that's one way to raise money. Okay. Traditional banks can't do that. Or you can say, listen, I've got this great company, I don't have the wherewithal to go and take out a loan, I'm willing to give up 10% of this company in exchange for cash. Banks can't do that. You can't go and own shares in somebody's company. A merchant bank or an investment bank can do that. You can hold shares in trust. You can do so many things. So it's kind of a creative way to bring the necessary financing that is needed to the private sector.
Okay. Now, there are a few other questions I have about the merchant bank in terms of how many persons would be employed, but I really want to ask you about how the merchant bank is going to address some of the needs of the oil and gas sector. And in mentioning this, the context that I'm asking this question is in terms of the fact that many persons in oil and gas have been saying that the collateral that would be required of them by banks in order to access funding to be able to be a player in the oil and gas sector, they're not able to do that. Is it safe to say that the merchant bank would be able to fill this gap, would be able to give them a platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, I mean, they can sell shares in their company. And we, the merchant bank, can take those shares, or we can orchestrate the sale of those shares. They can factor their receivables. I think the legislation isn't in place yet for that, but what I mean by that, some of the complaints you're hearing in the ONG industry is that the local companies have to wait a long time before they get paid.
Yes.
So I do the work, I have my invoice, I send it up to Washington or Ottawa or London, wherever the company is, Japan, Tokyo, and it takes 90 days, sometimes 180 days, I've heard. I don't know for sure. But at any rate, it takes 90 days. Well, you still have to pay employees, you've got to buy supplies, you've got to pay rent, those types of things. So you cannot afford to go 90 days without replenishing your cash supply. Now, if you had a system where you can take that receivable, that bill, that invoice, and assign it to a bank, the bank advances you the money, and when you get paid, the bank gets the money, right? So these are some of the creative things that I think we want to introduce into the system that will help to pulse the system, right?
Yeah.
Right now the system is tied up. It really can't do much because there's no capital flow. You know, the layman in Guyana used to say money's not circulating. Well, capital isn't circulating. It is not given life to flow efficiently to jumpstart a private sector in a real way. And we hope that the merchant bank can address that.
Okay. Thank you for that, sir. Now, Mr. Haynes, can you tell me how many persons would be employed once the merchant bank is up and running?
We're going to start off with about, 10 or 12, combination of full-time and part-time. Because merchant, again, it's not, we're not going to have a line of bank tellers and customer service rep and those type. Yeah, truth be told, this kind of stuff you can do on a laptop. I mean, I don't mean to trivialize it at all, but it doesn't require the traditional size that you would normally see with a bank. Having said that, there are certain positions that you absolutely need. We need a compliance officer, a chief financial officer, a managing director. We've got a board, HR, accounting, those types of things. So we're going to start off with we need a government rep. So we're going to start off with about 10 to 12 individuals, and it will grow as the need arises.
Okay. And outside of the fundamental services that you spoke about there in terms of assisting with the capital, are there any other services that you might be providing that you can tell us about?
Oh, yeah. We want to do investment management, investment advice. We trust services. So for example, we want to look at the pension schemes. If we can help them manage their monies and provide a greater return than they're currently getting, well, we'd be available to do that as well. Financial services, just helping people think through growth and scaling and acquisition and mergers and capital structure. What should that look like? Do you really need to borrow? Do you need debt? Do you need equity? Do you have the right combination? It's that type of financial advisory. Even looking at the whole financial architecture of the country and asking ourselves, is it designed to take advantage of the opportunity that's going to be coming down the pike, that's already here, and helping in ways to refine those types of things. So yes, it's financial advisory services, as well as investment management, giving pension schemes and insurance companies and the lot alternative vehicles to invest some of their monies, right? Some of it, a lot of it is invested in government securities, government treasuries, and it earns something. We're going to compete for those dollars because we're going to make the case that we can provide, not guarantee, but we can provide a higher return to those pension schemes.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Now let's turn to audits. I'm not sure if many persons may be aware, but you were instrumental in putting together or organizing a consortium of companies, Guyanese companies, to handle a portion of the cost recovery audits. Now, can you tell us a bit about the companies that were involved you were able to pull together for this process, and what exactly would they be handling? What aspect of the audits would they be handling? Because we have quite a few bills from ExxonMobil to audit.
Yeah.
So what sect of that are you handling?
Okay, so it was the vice president and the president, in their wisdom, they decided that the audit should be led by local firms. And so the vice president went out, he met with the ICAG, he met with several firms, and I think firms were invited to submit a bid. And I totally agree with that strategy. I think Guyanese should control Guyana's, or should represent Guyana's interest. So I was approached to put together a consortium and to submit a bid for that audit. So I went out and we had an initial consortium that was called RHVE, I think.
Yes.
The R was Chris Ram. Chris was selected because he's revered as an accountant and an attorney. He's quite knowledgeable, his experience is unquestioned. And Chris is generally a good guy to have on the team. And so I enjoyed having Chris. The other firms, the H was, of course, me, Haynes, and I bring a wealth of experience. I'd written extensively on oil and gas. I haven't performed oil and gas audits, but I understand a little bit about it. And so my firm, my local firm, which is Ramdiol and Haynes,
Okay.
that's the H. RH. V is Vitality.
Yeah.
Vitality is the young man representing Vitality is a young man named Abbas. And Vitality was selected because they were one of the local firms that submitted a bid under the World Bank's initial RFP. And so when we're looking for, okay, the World Bank first came out with this, and we looked at firms that had submitted. Strange enough, none of the local firms submitted. There were only a handful. I don't know, I thought the requirements were written poorly, but be that as it may. So Vitality was selected for that, and Eklizar is the E. Eklizar was selected because they were the only local firm that made the cut for the World Bank's RFP, and that's a big deal. The only local firm that was shortlisted or down select.
Okay.
So we put together a consortium, RHVE, and we started to work together to submit our bid. There may have been others working to submit bids, I don't know, but we were submitting our bid. We worked fairly well, we put the proposal together, and the night before we submitted the proposal, we came up with a cost, final cost, X dollars. Chris felt it was too high, and in fairness to Chris, he said, Floyd, that's unconscionable, I can't be part of that. And I said, Chris, listen, this is just to open the door. We don't know where the final number will end up, but we don't know what we don't know. And it's sort of a good negotiating tactic anyway, to go high and then come back. Chris felt he knew the answer already, and so he didn't want to be part of that. And I said, Chris, well, this is your time to leave, because I was the team lead. I am the team lead for that consortium. And Chris left on friendly terms. I was sad to see Chris go. I think he would have been a crucial part of it, because unquestionably he's one of the most knowledgeable accountants in the country. And we're doing this on behalf of Guyana. Okay, we're representing the nation's interest, and it's an opportunity lost. I hope Chris comes back. So Chris left, and we were down to VHE, Vitality, Haynes, Eklazar. That's the team that submitted the proposal. The government came back and asked for clarification and questions. We've responded, and we are currently waiting for a decision.
And this is awaiting a decision to audit the 460?
No, this is
2017?
Forward. I think the last audit went through 17. We're 18, 19, and 20.
So you're doing 2018?
3 years, yeah. I think
2019.
I know it's 3 years. It could be 19, 20, 20. But I think it's 18, 19, and 20.
18, 19, and 20. Okay. And the bid was submitted when?
The bid was submitted in, I want to say, February or March. And there has been some exchanges between the ministry and our consortium. They came back with questions. They pushed back. There were additional forms they wanted clarification on. And I think that process has concluded. And they have everything they need from us to make an award. To my knowledge, no award has been made. And the audit really is to look at claimed cost, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you think of cost, there are two aspects to costs. You look at the validity of the cost, mm-hmm. and what I call the legitimacy. So what's the validity? To establish validity, a cost has to be properly authorized. The goods or service would have been received. There should be evidence that that good or service was received, mm-hmm. and there should be a proper invoice. If you have those three things, if they align, then you have a valid invoice, a valid cost. Whether or not that cost is legitimate is a different question. It has to do with, is it allowable under the PSA? Are you moving costs from one project over to our project? That's the ring fencing thing. Are there transfer prices where you have several projects going on that are similar in different countries, and you're moving costs from this country to here because the tax advantage is better here? So those types of things you have to go through to establish the legitimacy of the cost. So that's the approach we are going to take. But it's looking at the entire cost that Exxon is claiming. Now, I want to temper the expectations of the public. There is this belief, and Kiana, you and I talked about this, there is this belief that an audit is to go and find the bad guys and find corruption. That's not what an audit does. It's not the purpose of an audit. And there was an article that was carried in the Kaieteur, and I think you and I exchanged. Guyana, what is it? Paraphrasing. Guyana could be saving hundreds of millions of dollars if they were to perform the audit, or they're losing hundreds of millions because they're not doing the audit. And that is just patently incorrect. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. What this audit does, once we identify that there are questioned costs, we then take it to the government, who then take it to Exxon. It's adjudicated. If at the end of that adjudication process it is determined by all the parties that these costs are in fact not allowed, then it comes out of cost oil, which then pushes up Guyana's profit. That's how it works. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. And you can't know that before you've undertaken the audit. So I don't want for the general public to run away with this idea that, oh, we're gonna go out and audit Exxon, and we're gonna find that they've cheated us gazillions of dollars. To which I say, maybe. maybe not. Who knows? Nobody knows. And nobody can know. That's the purpose of the audit, is to establish whether those costs are valid and allowable under the terms of the agreement.
Now, for the audit that you submitted this bid for, how much time do you have to do 2018, 2019, and 2020?
Oh, they've allotted 4 months. And it's possible, and these are man months, so it doesn't include wait time and waiting for documents and those types of things. It includes actual working. It's possible depending on the readiness of the information.
Okay.
Exxon's a pretty organized company, and they probably have all that stuff automated. And if they have it all, we can probably deploy the right team and get it done. We have a very good team. If we're successful, if we're a successful firm, we have a really good team.
And your army of auditors,
Yes.
that is how many soldiers?
Oh, I've got a bunch of I've got a whole team of people. Locally, I've got access to most of the accountants. I have a company called Martindale out of the U.S. on my team. It's a large multi-million-dollar firm with lots of accountants. I've got a petroleum engineering firm out of the UK, and I've got a legal. I wrote about this years ago, and I argued that to do this type of thing, you need a variety of expertise. Accountants, petroleum engineers, and legal expertise, and we have all of those in our teams from some of the best firms in the business.
So if you were to quantify how many persons you have on your team, you would say that is in excess of?
I'd say a dozen.
Okay.
And with reach back capability to supply more if need be.
A dozen experts.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now, before time runs out on us, I just wanted to get your feedback on about two other issues. The first being the Natural Resource Fund, which has been amended significantly and passed. And I wanted your perspective on if you believe the current vision and use of the oil funds is enough to keep us away from the dreaded Dutch disease. Do you think we're on the right path?
Well, it's too soon to tell, but I believe we are. So far, it doesn't seem there is no indication that we are on that path.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know this? Well, what are the indicators of Dutch disease? Well, there are two. There is an appreciation in your currency, which hasn't happened. Our currency has been between 210 and 215, 218, depending on where you go. And it's been relatively stable, thanks to Governor Dr. Ganga. He has deliberately managed the stabilization of that currency, so he gets the credit for that, or some of the credit at least. So there is no appreciation, or there hasn't been an appreciation. And the other part of the Dutch disease is a contraction of your above-ground industries. Well, if you look at the Bank of Guyana report, there's been some contraction in rice and sugar, and that can be attributed to flooding. Fishing and forestry is expanded, grew by 11%. Mining is expanded, bauxite's expanded. So to date, there is no indication of a Dutch disease. Now, does it mean that it's not going to happen? No. It probably will happen, as it always does. But we have to mitigate against it. One of the things you can do is to what is called smoothing out the rate at which you withdraw monies from the NRF to bring it into the economy. Remember the Natural Resource Fund, I keep forgetting its name, but that fund is kept outside of the country, and for good reason. And I believe this government has shown considerable restraint. considerable restraint. Dr. Ali will be in office now 2 years. And he came into office, that fund had monies. It was growing. At one time, there were about $600 million in that account. And the government didn't touch it. They wanted to make sure they had the legislation in place. And to me, it's an exercise of prudence and discipline on the part of the government, and we should give them credit for it. But more importantly, they understood what bringing that wash of money into the country will do. That's the kind of thing that will cause your exchange rate to appreciate, and the ripple effect of that. Your local goods and services get expensive, you can't compete, and so on and so forth. So I think we're on the right track. It's yet to be seen. I think it's too soon to tell. The other thing that I think to note is that there are a lot of growth in the non-oil sector, right? Real oil GDP grew, but also real non-oil GDP grew. So, there's an explosion of construction going on around the country. So there's lots of things happening that's not related. Well, some of it is related, but they're not directly involved in oil and gas. There's an agri-conference that's coming up. These are all attempts to diversify. And you may have to subsidize some of those industries in the final analysis to keep them, And subsidy, I don't mean just give them money, but, tax incentives, those types of things. So I think, I think they're certainly thinking the right thing.
Thank you for that contribution there, Mr. Haynes. And now to wrap up tonight's program, I wanted to just ask you about your thoughts on the passage of the local content legislation, and what, in your view, do we need to get in place? What mechanisms are necessary outside of the local content legislation to ensure that we maximize value and ensure we use the resources that we have to our advantage? So far, we've sanctioned 4 projects which hold $60 trillion worth of oil. What mechanisms should we put in place to ensure we get the most out of that?
I think training is a major part of it. Because remember, we are new to oil and gas, and so we don't have the expertise. I saw the president is pushing a lot of training. He gave out scholarships. They're training welders. Those are all the right things. But it's a three-legged stool, right? You have the government has a role to play, which is to pass the legislation and enforce it, police it. The government has to make sure that the contractors are living up to their end of the deal. It's the government's job to enforce it. So that's the government side. The other side is the contractor. They have to do their part. They have to make sure that the opportunities are out there and people are aware of them and they're competitive, those types. And then the last part of that is the citizenry. We have to arm and equip ourselves with the requisite skill. Because as I said before in several shows, if we are inefficient, let's assume we force Exxon to hire unskilled workers or whatever. Their costs of doing business goes up. And that redounds to who? Guyana pays the bill. So it's a two-edged sword. So we have to make sure that we have the requisite training. And once we have the training, the local content is sort of a sliding scale where you start off behind, and then slowly but surely it shifts. And more you take a bigger chunk and a bigger chunk and a bigger chunk until you can see Guyanese ultimately performing those managerial and those high-level jobs. But we're not ready for that right now. You can't just say it's our oil, just hire all Guyanese. And I don't believe in artificial targets. I personally, I'm not addressing any specific policy. This idea, 50, 90, what does that mean? That's substance. That's form over substance. Mm-hmm. And I, as an accountant, I'm more substance over form. Let Guyanese develop the skills and the expertise, and then we will hold the contractors' feet to the fire. But you can't do it before we have the skills and the expertise. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Duly noted, Mr. Haynes, and thank you once
I thought you
again
were asking for the
for...
national oil company. I didn't get a chance to talk.
We've actually hit the 34 minutes.
Okay.
Hit 34 minutes. But Raj, do I have about 5 more minutes? Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. So now that we actually have a bit more time, I did wanted to find out about your thoughts about this raging debate that we have going on about a national oil company with a strategic partner. What are your thoughts on that? What are the pros, the cons? Do you believe it's the right avenue for us?
Yeah, so I'm not sure it's the right question, but I'll phrase it this way. It is something that ought to be considered.
Okay.
Right? Again, I try to get away from the binary. Is it the good? Most of the arguments have been binary. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. And I read some of the comments written in the papers, and I thought the arguments were weak. With all due respect to some of the experts, for example, I read Dr. Mangel's article, and he basically cited a bunch of things that the government has failed to do. And therefore, we shouldn't have a national oil company. And to me, the pivot was not justified. It's like saying because you failed the driver's test so many times, you shouldn't have a car. They're two different questions. Sure, there are things we haven't done, and he cited corruption and all those types of things. But those are issues that have to be addressed. The real question is whether or not a national oil company is a strategic asset for nation building. And I would posture that it is. It is definitely a strategic asset for a number of reasons. National pride, oil is the national patrimony. Why shouldn't we control our own oil? It allows you to develop technical expertise that you otherwise wouldn't have. It allows you access to information that you wouldn't have. Right now, the oil companies have all the information. It's what we call information asymmetry. They know everything about our oil, and we have to listen to what they tell us. Well, a national oil company changes that equation. It's win-win. It could be used for development of the country. And so from those standpoints, I think it's something that ought to be on the table. I don't think it's an either or, but we should look at it. I think. And the vice president, I think, has been quoted out of context. He said it's one of the options. I don't think he ever said we're going to go do a national oil company.
No, I don't believe it was ever said that he ever made that decision.
Oh, okay.
It was reported that they are looking at this avenue, considering the pros and cons, and by September they'll make a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I would definitely favor considering it. The other report was from the IDB or somebody. And again, I'm usually concerned when you have these. The IDB, with all due respect, is a developmental agency. It's not a nation-building agency. It's a developmental agency, and they've been good to us, and they've done some good things. But I don't know. I don't think whether we develop the nation's resources or how we develop the nation is something for the IDB and those
financial institutions.
And then the other thing people say is like, look at this country, and I'm not going to call any names. But again, it's such a bad analogy, right? It's like saying your neighbor mismanaged his garden, therefore you shouldn't have a garden. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Of course, there's people with bad gardens, but maybe you're going to do your garden right. So the fact that there are countries that have mismanaged a national oil company is not in and of itself a reason for Guyana to not have one. So I would conclude by saying it's something that ought to be looked at and ought to be taken very seriously. It is a strategic asset in the nation-building arsenal.
That is a thought-provoking point to end on there, Mr. Haynes. And I'd like to thank you for being part of tonight's program. And Kaieteur News wishes you all the best with the Merchant Bank, New Haven Merchant Bank to be exact.
Thanks, Guyana. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
To our viewers and our listeners, thank you as usual for participating in Guyana's Oil and You, a special edition on this Tuesday evening. And we invite you to join us again on a Thursday for another episode where we will be featuring perspectives from Mr. Arthur Deacon. He is co-director of the energy program at America's Market Intelligence. Without further ado, I'd like to close tonight's program. Thank you once again for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Haynes, for being here.
Thank you, Kiana. I was happy to do this.